قرآني نبض حياتي، قرآني طهر ذاتي، قرآني عصمة أمري.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Respected brothers and sisters, I want to welcome you to the second session of Feminism, where we discuss what is feminism, what is the Islamic standpoint, what are the issues with feminism, how do we deal with it, and how do we treat people who are affected by it in our society. So this is the second lesson. In the first lesson, we went in depth into what exactly is feminism, or what qualifies, what doesn't qualify, what is a problem, what isn't a problem, and we went through the Islamic position on those same points of contention. So just to recap, feminism is basically two principles. The first is that men and women are identical. The second is that superiority and inferiority is based on your job status and your pay and all of these things. And from there, all of the different symptoms come about. So from there, women don't want to look after the children, they want to work, or they want to be slaves of the capitalist system. They want to, dress just like men dress. They want to be treated in exactly the same way when they're not exactly the same. So what is the Islamic position? The Islamic position is that men and women are equal. They both have an equal opportunity to get into Jannah, but they are not identical. They are different physically, emotionally, mentally, and therefore they will be treated differently, and different ahkam and laws will apply to them. And the second premise, which is the Islamic position, is that superiority and inferiority is based on your position in the hereafter, and this is something that men and women have equal access to. Now, in the previous lesson, we started with the poem on feminism, which was done by Sapiens Institute, and which is explained by Brother Muhammad Hijab in his series called Londaniya. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about primarily the history of feminism. Now, this is only going to be maybe a half an hour session. If you want an extended version of this, you can go to Muhammad Hijab's channel, where he has 2 hours basically on the history of feminism. And this is just a condensed version of that. But the reason why we've made this series is because we want to discuss more than just the history of feminism. So we wanted what was discussed in the previous lesson, and also in the next lesson, where we're going to talk about how to answer feminism, how to show that it's harmful, how to treat people who are affected by it. We also want to include those things. So just to go back to the poem, we translated the first line, and you can see it here on the screen. We translated the first line, which said, وَالنَّسَوِيَّةُ دَعَتْ لِمَا أَسَى لِلِاسْتِوَاءِ بَيْنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ. Feminism is that which claims to call towards equality between men and women. Then the poem begins to talk about the history of feminism. And the poem says, as you can see, ثُمَّ لَهَا مَرَاحِلُ تُعَدُّ ثَلَاثَةٌ لِأَجْلِهَا تَعَدُّ. Then we say that feminism has 3 different stages, marahil, and these marahil in English we translate it as 3 different waves. لِأَجْلِهَا تَعَدُّ. Because of all of these different waves of feminism coming one after the other, eventually feminism went to the extreme. Right? And now it begins to talk about the first wave of feminism. So it says, أَوَّلُهَا فِي الْإِنْتِخَابِ طَالَبَتْ. The first wave of feminism was where the woman demanded equal rights to voting, what we call suffrage, rights of suffrage. So fil intikhabi, with respect to voting, طالبت, they demanded equal rights. فسمحوا لها وبعد شاركت. And eventually they were given this right, and they shared in the voting process. Right? So the first wave of feminism, it's very interesting to understand this. The first wave of feminism arose for many things which Islam allows women to do. So in Europe, when the first wave of feminism, now in the 18th century, 17th, 18th century, women were not allowed to own property like men. They were not allowed to vote. They were not allowed to do a whole host of things that Islam would allow them to do. So in the West, they had gone to another extreme, where they were actually abusing women. The women were not given rights that they deserved. And therefore, rightfully, women fought against this. Okay, but we find that historically, whenever one group goes to one extreme and another group tries to rectify it, instead of coming back to the center, they always go a little bit more on that side. So you found that in the past, when the church was in charge, although the Catholic Church was by and large pro-science, but maybe people on the ground and other factors created this thing where they were against science, and it felt like science and religion were at loggerheads, and the Catholic Church was ruling the state, etc. And when science now fought back, so to speak, instead of coming to a balanced position, we now have extreme scientism, which says that all religion is false. So a similar thing happened here with feminism. In the West, they took it to one extreme where they abused women, and now when the women started fighting for their rights, instead of coming back to the center, they went to extremes where they wanted to be exactly like men. So the first wave of feminism, yes, while in principle they were fighting for rights to property maybe, but primarily the rights to voting, still we see that there were major issues with this first wave of feminism. And this is something very ajib, that it's very, very amazing that when we see deviant ideologies, the proponents or the inventors or the founders of these deviant ideologies were always deviant people. They were always people with ugly, filthy habits. And why? Because when we look at our religion, Islam, the truth, and the Anbiya, and the religion of Islam that came from all of the Anbiya were the most perfect people. And those people who came with ideologies to go against what the Anbiya came with, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it such that they were always exposed to have habits that everyone agrees are ugly, right? And the same thing happens here with feminism in the first wave. So, for example, there's a lady by the name of Rebecca Felton. She is hailed as the first female senator in the United States. She's celebrated. She's someone who pushed for this first wave of feminism. She became a senator. People celebrate her and all of these things. But when you look at her writings, she believed in lynching black people, which means going out and, mob justice, killing black people. She believed, she advocated for this. So these are the types of people that were pushing this movement, right? Then you have others like that who were openly racist, who felt that feminism was only for women. And this was the first stage of feminism, where they were only fighting for the rights of white women. They didn't care about black women, because at that time black people were second-class citizens in America. All of these rights that they demanded were actually only for white people, and in their writings you can see that the founders of first wave feminism, we saw one who believed in lynching black people. The others actually were racist, and they believed black people to be below them and to be inferior to them. So from the get-go, even though we might say that what they were trying to fight for was legitimate, etc., give them the right to vote or whatever it is, but at the heart of it, it was coming from people who had ugly and filthy ways, as is the case with all deviant ideologies. So that's basically the first wave. There's not a lot to say more than that, because that is not the feminism we see today. The feminism we see today, amongst Muslim men and women, is not that of first wave feminism, where they were fighting for basic rights and which was elitist and was only for white women and not for black women. But it's something that we need to bear in mind. Now we're going to go to the second wave. So let's read the poem. So that was the first wave, had to do with suffrage and voting. The second wave, it says, وَبَعْدَهَا قُمْنَ بِمَا تَقُومُ رِجَالُهُنَّ وَرُمْنَ مَا تَرُونَ. After that comes the second wave. And what is the second wave? Where women want to have the same positions, the same responsibilities, they want to do the same things as their husbands, as their men, and they want to have the same ambitions as goals. وَرُمْنَ مَا تَرُومُ. So just to go over that, وَبَعْدَهَا, after the first wave, now comes the second wave, قُمْنَ بِمَا تَقُومُ رِجَالُهُمْ. They wanted to do whatever the men were doing. وَرُمْنَ مَا تَرُومُ. And they wanted whatever the men had, they wanted that as well. حَتَّى رَأَيْنَا. The poem continues, until these women began to believe أَنَّ مَنْ فِي الْبَيْتِ, that woman who stays in her house, right, who looks after the children, who looks after the house, who cooks the food, they began to believe that عَامِلَةٌ فِي سِجْنِهَا الْمَقِيتِ, she is actually working in a comfortable concentration camp. And this refers to a statement by one of the forerunners of second wave feminism, which we're going to talk about just now. Right. So, and then the poem continues. So there's 3 lines on second wave feminism, and as we will see, second wave feminism is the most relevant, and it's basically the type of feminism that we find within the Muslim society. The 3rd verse continues and says, وَبَعْدَهَا طَالَبْنَا بِاسْتِوَاءٍ بِلَا تَفَاوُتٍ وَلَا انْتِهَاءٍ. And eventually it came to a stage where they wanted complete identicality, complete equality. There should be no difference. Bila tafawutin walantihai. No difference between men and women should be recognized, and this is what second wave feminism wanted. And now we're going to spend some time talking about this, because this is the most interesting wave, and this is the sort of feminism that we find around us today. So it is this wave of feminism, second wave feminism, where they began to say, no. We're not just talking about the right to vote and all of these things. Men and women are the same, are equal, are identical. They must be treated in exactly the same way. Women must go out to work. Staying in the house is something that's looked down upon. Its domesticity is something that is regarded with disdain. Marriage, childbearing, being a mother, these things are something that women have been oppressed by doing. They should go out, they should work, they should liberate themselves, in inverted commas. And second wave feminism, basically there's 3 major players that we're going to talk about. The first is Betty Friedan in her book The Feminine Mystique. Right? She is the one who said the home is a comfortable concentration camp, meaning she was having such a derogatory tone towards women staying at home. She literally called it a concentration camp, and we know what a concentration camp is, where people are oppressed and forced to do certain things. Then Simone de Beauvoir, she wrote a book called The Second Sex. So these 2 books, The Feminine Mystique and The Second Sex, are basically like the handbooks and the go-to guides for second wave feminism, written by Betty Friedan and Simone de Beauvoir. And then there's also Germaine Greer, who's another big proponent of second wave feminism. Now we're going to look at these 3 people, Betty Friedan, Germaine Greer, Simone de Beauvoir, and we're going to just examine how they themselves realized that they were wrong in their lives. So the first one, Betty Friedan, she said, the home is a comfortable concentration camp. She said that women need to go out and work. All women who stay at home are oppressed. All of these things, right? She wrote another book later on in her life where she recanted and she retracted, and she said, I was wrong in my first book. Because she said, after I wrote my first book and women started going out into the workplace, they started forcing themselves to work and look after the children. They were suffering mental breakdown, psychological stress. And she realized, and she said, that women are experiencing more signs of psychological stress than women had previously. After they started acting on my advice in my first book and going out to work, she also noted that one out of 3 women in the 1970s experienced a nervous breakdown. So she realized that what she had done was actually causing harm to women, because now instead of having one responsibility, which is the house and the children, they have 2 responsibilities now. It's resulting in nervous breakdowns, it's resulting in psychological stress that they can't handle. And she also realized later on in her life now that women have a profound impulse to have children. And this is something we know for a fact, that women are created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in such a way that they desire to have children. And what this Betty Friedan did in her first book was she basically rubbished having children and staying at home and all of these things, and she pushed the woman to go out to work. And so many of these women spent their 20s, 30s, 40s and even 50s working without children. And now when they reached the age of menopause and they couldn't get children, as we'll see with the next lady, they wanted children so badly, but they couldn't get it anymore. So Betty Friedan wrote her book, The Second Stage, where she said that, all of those things I said in the first book, it's harmed women. It's actually caused them to the quality of their lives to decrease. And she states here, and this is very, very interesting. She says we had better find change. Meaning, after people accepted her advice in her first book, she's saying we want to change this, but change is hard because women have an almost religious feeling about this movement. It keeps us from asking questions about what really matters to women now. So she's saying that when I wrote this first book, I said women need to be the same as men, identical to men, they must all be working. And now all the women, there's been a movement that's been created, they're all following what I said. But now they're so hell-bent on getting equality and identicality that they're not looking at the fact that it's harming women. And now even though I started the movement and they listened to me and they started the movement, when I'm telling them we need to stop, we need to change, they're not listening to me because it's become a cult. And this is her own words that she wrote in the year 1981. Right? So that was Betty Friedan. And we can see here that in their own lifetime, all three of these women felt the ill effects of the deviant ideology they had put forward. This first one was Betty Friedan. The second one we spoke about was Germaine Greer. Right? She wrote a book in 1981 called The Whole Woman. Right? And Germaine Greer was another one of those people who said that, those women who stay at home, they achieve nothing in life, they need to go out, it's only job status, earning, that gives you your, any worth in life. And she made women follow this ideology blindly. And eventually she herself says, now after she passed the age of menopause, she's over the age of 55, she says, I mourn for my unborn babies. Because she spent her whole life now in working, and she said, this is liberation, this is truth, not staying at home, not looking after children. Now when she's over 55, she can't have children anymore. She says, I mourn for my unborn babies. I wish that I could have had babies, but I can't now. And she also says, I still have pregnancy dreams, waiting with vast joy, something that will never happen. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tormented her in such a way for leading so many women astray that when she was older, she's saying, I'm having dreams of becoming pregnant where I'm so happy awaiting this thing, but it's just a dream and it's never going to happen. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us again the ill effects of going against the Sharia. The Sharia is here to keep you in a perfect balance. Whenever you go against this perfect balance, there's always going to be repercussions. And you could see this with Simone de Beauvoir, with Betty Friedan. You saw this with Germaine Greer. And now we're going to go on to the third figure. Her name is Simone de Beauvoir. So she wrote the book, The Second Sex, and again in this book she pushed, as the other two did, for women going out, for being the same as men, being identical to men, and all of these things. But now when we read her writings, we find something completely different. So she had a boyfriend. Obviously now for them marriage is oppression, childbearing is oppression, so she didn't get married. She had a boyfriend named Sartre, and she said that he was truly superior to me in her writings. But out in the open she was telling women, no, you all are the same as men, you all are better than men, this, that. But in her writing she's saying, no, I felt this man was superior to me. She says, I felt dominated by someone else intellectually. I was simply not in his class. I detest my own reflection. Now just think about this, right? No Muslim woman who understands Islam will ever say, I am inferior to a man, or I detest myself because I can't do what a man does. Why? Because Muslim women know that they have a role and responsibility that they are better at, and men have a role and responsibility that they are better at. But what happened to these women like Simone de Beauvoir? She began to think that no, what the men are doing, that's the true barometer, that's the true gauge of superiority. And now she tried to do what he was doing. She couldn't do it as well as he did. So she felt herself to be inferior. She felt that she actually began to detest herself. And this is how you see the ill effects of feminism. When you begin to think that to go out and get a job, that's the judge of your worth and your rank in life, then when the women have other things to do as well and they can't compete with the men, they begin to hate themselves. They begin to think that men are superior to them. Whereas a Muslim woman who follows the Islamic paradigm will never think that a man is superior to her, because she knows that superiority and inferiority is based on your rank on the day of Qiyamah in Jannah, and that in that she can definitely surpass her husband, or her husband can surpass her. No one knows, no one will know until the day of Qiyamah, then they will be able to tell. So this lady was such a hypocrite. You see here that when her husband, she told women that you shouldn't serve your husband, you shouldn't look after him, cook for him, do all these things for him. But she herself says that when she was waiting her boyfriend's return from Paris, she did the house up, she purchased new clothes, she dressed up for him. So all of the things she was telling women not to do, she was doing it herself, because this is the natural relationship between men and women. Each have different roles. And one of the things that prompted her to do what she did was that one day her boyfriend called her a mere housewife. And this is a very, very fundamental point. That feminism, although the three core role players we said were these women, feminism is also perpetuated by men. How does that happen? Same like Simone de Beauvoir, her boyfriend called her mere housewife and told her, hey, what you like, I'm just paraphrasing now, what you doing with your life? I go to work, I earn money, you're just staying at home, you're doing nothing here. He began to look down on her for doing a woman's role. So she felt, hey, wait, now that means I need to go out to earn. So it seems like this man's comment actually sparked her to start second wave feminism, which means that men are also just as responsible. How are we just as responsible? Because when we go out to work the entire day and we come home and we know we're supporting the family, we treat the wife as though she did nothing. We say, oh, what you were doing the whole day? I was working the whole day. I'm going to be a king when I come home now. Yes, of course, the wife has to obey the husband, but by you not recognizing that her taking care of the children and her taking care of the house and her cooking for you is also some great role that she's fulfilling. When you don't recognize that, you are perpetuating feminism by making it seem like the only real thing that you can do to earn worth in life is to go out and work, and she's not doing that, therefore she's not worth anything. Na'udhu. As Muslim men, this is something also that we perpetuate, where we don't actively recognize and appreciate and understand that what the woman is doing is just as important as what we are doing. And for the success of the family and the household, both of these roles are important. And this is something we realize from the life of Simone de Beauvoir, who was exposed to be a hypocrite. She told women, don't serve your husband. She was serving her husband. She told women, you are identical to men. She said, no, my husband is superior to me. I detest myself, all of these things. And because her husband made her feel bad about staying at home, it prompted her to start this movement. And we as men should not fall into that same trap. Because you see, many men, immoral men, can benefit from feminism. Because what they will think is, okay, I'm going out to work. If I only work, we're only going to have so much of savings, all the money is going to go into the household. My wife must also work, she must. So now the man, immoral men, start perpetuating feminism. They tell the wife, hey, what you contributing to the household? You must also pay half the rent, you must also do this. They force the woman to go out to work because it benefits them, because now they don't have so many expenses on their head. This is what Islam is against. And feminism oppresses the woman by making her go out to work, by not forcing the man to take care of her. And obviously it oppresses the children as well. So now she has a double responsibility. She must pay for the rent and half the rent and everything, and she must look after the children and cook and clean and everything. That's completely immoral. In Islam, the woman has a role. She needs to be looked after, and she will carry out her role. The man will carry out his role. He will be looked after as well. So second wave feminism is the one we need to focus on. And in our next lesson, when we go through the harms of feminism, how to answer those people who are affected by feminism, when we go through that in the next lesson, we're going to talk about the second wave feminism. Because it's second wave feminism that's based on those two principles. Men and women are identical, and superiority and inferiority is based on your job status and your job pay. So that is the feminism that is around us today. But for the sake of complete history, we will look at third wave feminism as well. So third wave feminism, now to understand third wave feminism, we need to understand again what's the premise of feminism. The premise of feminism, or one of the premises, is that for the entire human history, women have been oppressed. Therefore now we need to fight for their rights and make sure that they are equal to men. So we need to push certain things for women only to the exclusion of men to basically right the wrongs. But now, in the 1990s, so second wave feminism was in the 20s or 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. In the 90s, the 2000s, 2010, third wave feminism started. So third wave feminists said, wait a second, women were not the only people who were oppressed. Black people were oppressed as well. So if a woman is black, so she's black and she's a woman, why should she join the women's movement? Shouldn't she join the black movement where there's men? Why should she stand with white women against black men? So third wave feminism now came about with something called intersectionality, which means that you can't just group oppression into men and women. Men were not oppressed, women were oppressed. Because certain men were oppressed more than women. Black women were oppressed historically more than white women for the last 300-400 years. So therefore, people are not just man or woman. There's black man, there's gay man, there's a black woman, there's a gay woman, all of these things. So we have to take into account all of those things. And this basically undercut the entire feminism. Because now a black woman says, wait, I don't want to join the feminist movement. The feminist movement is giving white women rights over black men. But I'm a black woman. I believe this black man was more oppressed. I should stand with him against the woman. And so feminism, when it evolved into third wave feminism, now it began to fight for the rights of other groups of people, like let's say black men, over the rights of white women. And it basically dissolved the entire premise of feminism, which is that there's men, there's women were oppressed, and now we need to fight for the rights of women. So third wave feminism is very, very interesting in that it basically undercuts the entire second wave feminism. So you find here that in this third wave feminism also, it began to pave the way for transgenderism. So you have Judith Butler, she states that sex is a contrived premise, a fiction. There's no such thing as sex, being a boy, being a male, being a female, right? And you have others here who felt a similar thing and who realized that, we can't just categorize people into men and women. So this third wave feminism, we're not going to discuss it too much because it's not really found in the society around us. Second wave feminism is found in the society around us. But it's interesting to note how third wave feminism came along and undercut the whole of second wave feminism. So third wave feminism also, because now feminism leads to transgenderism. This is something that many people don't realize. Feminism says, wait, there's no separate roles for men and women. There's not such a thing as manliness and womanliness. These are all social constructs. So once they do away from that, then what really is a man? What really is a woman? What if a woman wants to do the things a man wants to do? What if a man wants to do the things a woman wants to do? And from there you get transgenderism, which is a man who says, I feel like a woman, and people now must treat him like a woman. But it stemmed from feminism, where they broke the divide between manliness, womanliness. These are manly things, these are womanly things, these are man's roles, these are woman roles. They said, no, they're all one. So now it came such that people said, well, okay, if there's no real difference between the two, I feel like I want to do womanly things, even though the person's a man, so they allowed that. So third wave feminism actually led to transgenderism, and transgenderism came and opposed feminism. Why? Because now you had men who biologically they are men, they possess male genitalia. They are saying, I identify as a woman, I'm a woman. So now they want to join the feminist movement, and they want to say, no, I want all the rights that you're giving women there. I also want those rights. But the women in the feminist movement are saying, but you're a man. How can now? So what's happening is men are coming into the feminist movement by pretending to be women as transgenderism, and the women in the feminist movement are opposing this and saying, wait, we don't want this here. We only want, those who are born women. And so you find that here again, as second wave feminism led to third wave, and third wave undercut second wave, similarly second wave feminism and third wave feminism led to transgenderism, which came and undercut second wave feminism itself. So like that now, I just hope that this was a good, basically a brief understanding of feminism, where we have three waves. As you can see, it's mentioned there in the poem. The first wave was simply for rights or to vote, but it had a lot of racist undercurrent. Then the second wave was about men and women being identical, doing the exact same thing. And we saw how each of the forerunners of second wave feminism were made to regret their positions within their lifetime, and they were shown to be hypocrites. And then we saw third wave feminism, where they started worrying about blackness and gayness and other things in addition to simply being a woman, and how this led to transgenderism as well. And both third wave and transgenderism undercut second wave feminism. So that's a broad history where we stand today. And inshallah, next week we're going to list the harms of feminism and make people understand why it's harmful. Again, when we say feminism, we're not talking about a woman going out and getting educated or going to work. We're talking about this aqidah and belief that men and women should be treated in exactly the same way. And we're going to talk about how do we treat, or how do we explain to people that feminism is wrong, it's harmful, and it makes no sense. So Jazakallah khairan for listening. I do hope you enjoyed that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
إلهي أنت الحليم العليم العظيم الرحيم السميع أنت الحميد المجيد الرشيد الشهيد اللطيف الخبير